Iran just hit America's $100 million invisible F-35 jet. The F-35 was never supposed to be seen. That was the entire point. The F-35 was designed to enter contested airspace, strike its targets and return without the enemy ever knowing it was there. On the night of March 19th at 2:50 a.m. Iranian time, that premise was tested. An IRGC air defense system fired on a US F-35 Lightning II flying a combat mission over central Iran. The jet took damage midair. It made an emergency landing at a US military facility somewhere in the Middle East. US Central Command confirmed it. The aircraft landed safely and the pilot is in stable condition, said Capt. Tim Hawkins, spokesman for CENTCOM. This incident is under investigation. That statement is carefully worded. It confirms the emergency landing. It confirms the pilot's condition. What it does not confirm, and what the US military has not denied, is how the damage happened. This would be the first time Iran has hit a US aircraft in this war. Both the US and Israeli air forces are using F-35s in the conflict aircraft that cost upwards of $100 million each. Read that again. In the history of the F-35, a jet that has been deployed in combat operations since 2018 across Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, no enemy has ever confirmed a successful hit on one, until now. The IRGC did not understate what happened. Their statement read, "The F-35 was hit and seriously damaged in the central sky of Iran by what they described as an advanced modern aerospace defense system." They released footage, short, 7 seconds, a fighter jet visible in the sky, then an explosion, then a smoke trail. The footage was analyzed by open-source intelligence accounts within hours. The interface visible in the footage generally matches electro-optical infrared systems in Iranian service. The post-impact physics appeared too complex to be simulated. Analysts at the war zone noted the footage points to the real possibility that the jet was targeted by a passive sensor, the same kind they had repeatedly warned about. Passive sensor, that phrase matters. We will come back to it. To understand why this incident is significant, you need to understand what the F-35 stealth actually does and what it does not do. The stealth works against radar. The airframe's geometry, the radar absorbent coatings, the internal weapons bays, all of it is engineered to reduce the aircraft's radar cross-section to almost nothing. A conventional radar looking for an F-35 sees something roughly the size of a golf ball. That is why it is called a stealth aircraft. That is why it costs $100 million, but stealth has never been invisible to heat. Every jet engine produces exhaust. Exhaust produces heat. Heat produces an infrared signature, and an infrared-guided missile does not need radar to find its target. It finds heat. Electro-optical and infrared surface-to-air missile systems are especially dangerous because US fourth-generation fighter aircraft would have no idea they were being attacked until they were struck, unless they visibly saw the missile launch heading their way. Here's what that means in practice. A radar-guided missile emits a continuous pulse to track its target. That pulse can be detected. Electronic warfare systems on the aircraft can jam it. The pilot gets a warning. Countermeasures can be deployed. An infrared missile emits nothing. There is no radar pulse to detect. The electronic warfare suite has nothing to jam. The pilot receives no warning from the aircraft's threat detection system. The F-35 has advanced infrared countermeasures. The engineers at Lockheed Martin knew this vulnerability existed. The exhaust is cooled with mixed air to reduce the heat signature. The airframe coatings minimize surface temperature. The system is designed to suppress the signature below the detection threshold of most known infrared seekers, but Iran appears to have crossed that threshold. Most likely system used is the Bavar 373, Iran's domestically developed long-range air defense system, which integrates electro-optical infrared tracking alongside conventional radar. Some analysts also point to an upgraded S-300 variant with dual-mode guidance. Either way, the engagement used passive infrared tracking, no radar emissions, proximity detonation that scattered shrapnel into the airframe. The F-35 did not explode. It flew on, but it was damaged enough to require an emergency landing rather than a return to normal operations. Now consider what that data is worth. This incident possibly represents the first time an F-35 Lightning II has been hit by enemy fire in its operational history. That engagement produced real-world data, the exact infrared signature of an F-35 under combat conditions at altitude over contested airspace, the specific band of infrared that proved effective, the altitude and aspect angle, the seeker performance against the F-35 suppression systems. That data does not stay in Iran. Russia has been providing satellite intelligence and real-time electronic data to Iran throughout this conflict. China is watching. Every adversary of the United States that operates against F-35 operators, and that list includes Russia, China, North Korea, now has empirical confirmation of what the infrared vulnerability looks like in a live engagement. The F-35 program covers 17 nations. Every NATO ally operating this aircraft must now reassess the threat calculus they built their air defense penetration doctrine around. The engineers can adjust the software. They can update the electronic countermeasures. What they cannot do, not without a fundamental redesign that would take years and billions, is change the engine. The heat comes from combustion. Combustion is irreducible. You can suppress the signature. You cannot eliminate. That is the technical picture. Now look at what US officials were saying in the hours before this happened. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said on Thursday that the US is winning decisively and that Iran's air defense systems have been flattened. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper stated that US forces had flown over 6,000 combat flights flights and destroyed more than 100 Iranian naval vessels since the start of the operation. He said the US had achieved full air superiority over Iran. Full air superiority, that was the official position. And yet, an Iranian air defense system that was supposedly flattened detected, tracked, and fired on a $100 million stealth aircraft, the most advanced fighter jet ever built. The aircraft that NATO doctrine depends on to penetrate defended airspace in any future conflict. It did not fly through undetected. It flew through and came back damaged. This is not the first contradiction to emerge from this war. The escalation pattern through mid-March 2026 reveals the growing strain on U.S. aerial refueling capacity. Iran's distributed approach, striking U.S. assets in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iraq simultaneously, forced the U.S. and its allies to disperse their defensive assets, creating potential gaps. 6 U.S. service members were killed when a KC-135 aerial refueling aircraft crashed over western Iraq on March 12. 5 more KC-135 tankers were damaged on the ground at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia by Iranian missiles. 3 F-15 fighter jets were shot down in a friendly fire incident involving Kuwaiti air defenses. Approximately 12 MQ-9 Reaper drones, each costing over $30 million, have been lost since operations began. Reports estimate the U.S. spent roughly $779 million during the first 24 hours of Operation Epic Fury alone. Given the scale of the air campaign, 6,000-plus sorties, 100-plus naval vessels destroyed, Operation Epic Fury has already surpassed the opening phases of most post-Cold War U.S. military campaigns in intensity. And still, on the 20th day of this war, Iranian air defenses found an F-35. Trump's language throughout this conflict has followed a consistent pattern. Iran's military is destroyed. Their navy is gone. Their air force is gone. Their radar is gone. We are winning decisively. Each of those statements contains a grain of verifiable truth. Iran has lost significant naval assets. Missile production has been substantially disrupted. Air defense installations across fixed sites have been struck repeatedly. But road mobile air defense systems are a different problem entirely. Iran has road mobile air defenses that can hide and pop up out of nowhere. Moving fighters in for direct attacks doesn't mean they can operate freely without threat, especially when facing systems that can pop up virtually anywhere and give aircrews very little time to react. You cannot bomb a system you cannot find. A truck carrying a missile battery that moves every 48 hours does not appear on satellite imagery the same way a fixed radar installation does. Iran learned that lesson from watching what happened to Iraq in 1991. They built their doctrine around it. The F-35 is the answer the United States built for contested airspace. The aircraft that can go where others cannot. The platform the entire coalition's strike architecture depends on. It was hit by a truck. The campaign began with a wave of long-range standoff weapons, more than 160 Tomahawks in the opening phase. Then on day 4, General Kane reported a point of munitions transition, shifting from standoff strikes at range to stand-in precision strikes overhead Iran. Stand-in, that means pilots in the airspace. That means F-35s flying combat missions directly over Iran. That means the passive infrared threat that aviation analysts had been warning about for years was now the environment those pilots were operating in every day. The particular nature of Houthi air defenses had already prompted an increase in the use of stealthy aircraft like the F-35, exposing them to unconventional threats. If the same thing may now have happened in Iran, it should hardly come as a surprise. That is the assessment from one of the most respected aviation analysis outlets in the world. The threat was known. The exposure was a deliberate operational choice. The F-35 was put in that airspace because the doctrine said it could operate there with minimal risk. The doctrine was wrong. The investigation is underway. The pilot is stable. The F-35, or what is left of its operational readiness, sits somewhere at a U.S. base in the Middle East. Lockheed Martin shares fell when the news broke. Every nation that paid $100 million per aircraft for the promise of undetectable air superiority is now running the same calculation. What exactly did we buy? And is the answer still true? The IRGC has already announced what comes next. They called this the successful interception following more than 125 U.S. and Israeli drones already shot down by Iranian defense systems. They called it proof of effective and targeted changes in Iran's integrated defense architecture. Ballistic missile attacks have decreased by 90% since day one. Drone attacks have decreased by 83% since day one. Those are real numbers. The strikes have worked. Iran's conventional capacity has been degraded, but degraded is not destroyed. And passive infrared seekers mounted on road mobile launchers are not ballistic missiles. They are not drone factories. They are not naval vessels. They are the one category of threat that the most expensive air campaign in a generation has no clean answer for. The F-35 went into Iranian airspace and came back damaged. The 21st day of this war has begun. The investigation is ongoing, and somewhere in Iran, a mobile launcher that hit a $100 million stealth jet is already moving to a new position.